We're looking here at Capitol Hill in Washington next, where people are waking up to snow, number one, but to some good news as well. There will not be a partial government shutdown today. The House raced against the clock to pass a short-term spending bill last night. It was a bipartisan vote and secured a few weeks of funding, not the long-term view, but puts it off for now. Let's bring in Richard Madden, who's in our Washington bureau, with a backdrop that's much more like home for you, Richard, than usual there in Washington. A bit of a scramble for Congress last night, but again, this short-term stopgap measure, what does it mean?
Yeah, it means national parks can stay open, airport security staffing won't be reduced, and ultimately the United States can pay its bills. So you can credit that stormy weather for this. The winter storm threatened to disrupt the agenda on Capitol Hill. So last night, lawmakers moved up their vote on a short-term bill to fund the U.S. government until early March, narrowly avoiding another partial government shutdown that would have started, as you noted, this weekend. Now, Congress approved a $1.5 trillion agreement. It's basically a stopgap measure to keep the lights on and pay the bills, but just for the next 2 months. Hardline conservatives, many of them allies of former President Donald Trump, voted against it, pushing for more spending cuts. So, while there's progress on temporarily funding the government, there's a whole separate fight escalating in Congress over tying funding for Ukraine and Israel to the U.S. southern border. Now, Trump is urging his fellow Republicans to reject any deal negotiated with Democrats in the White House, setting up yet another showdown between President Joe Biden and House Speaker Mike Johnson.
I think the vast majority of members of Congress support aid to Ukraine. The question is whether or not a small minority are going to hold it up, which could be a disaster.
We understand that there's concern about the safety, security, sovereignty of Ukraine, but the American people have those same concerns about our own domestic sovereignty and our safety and our security.
Now, this is all setting up what's fast becoming a political proxy war on Capitol Hill. It's testing the influence of President Biden and former President Trump with their respective parties, and these divisions are likely to be amplified with election season officially underway.
So now funding for the government operations on into March, Richard, but what happens then?
Yeah, so in about 6 weeks, this funding deal expires, so lawmakers will be back at it again to come up with yet another spending agreement to avoid yet another shutdown. Congress is clearly divided, unable to agree on a long-term solution, and while the House Speaker is trying to sound optimistic, saying lawmakers simply need more time, it seems that compromise is in short supply here.
Richard, thank you very much. Richard Madden in our bureau in Washington.